Thank you all for being voluntarily here. Don't forget to sign the attendance sheets. It's serious this time. It's not a drill, put it this way. I would like to welcome our guests today here from the Ministry of the Kosovo Security Force and from the Kosovo Security Force. I would like to welcome our guest speaker, who is the Deputy Minister of the Kosovo Security Force, Mr. Burim Ramadani. I also would like to welcome Mr. General Haziri from the Kosovo Security Force and all the other colleagues from the Ministry and from the Kosovo Security Force. Mr. Burim Ramadani is, I would call him actually a veteran of state building in Kosovo. Actually, I don't know whether he knows anything else about Kosovo but state building and institution building. It's such a long time that he's involved in this. But he has a special duty. He is now in the Ministry of the Kosovo Security Force, and he has two very sensitive responsibilities. One is revising the national security strategy in a very complex international environment. All those who study international relations know it's a very dynamic environment. The Deputy Minister is also in charge, or one of the leading figures, of transforming the Kosovo Security Force into a regular army. So he's trying to do two marvelous jobs at the same time, and I personally wish Mr. Deputy Minister, please, without losing more time, the floor is yours. It will be, for example, the speech, and then you have answers, and by 4 o'clock...
question, who looks more veteran here?
You, of course. The floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's a real honor. I'm really delighted on the opportunity of just going through some of the topics that I believe are very important in this environment, as Robert just explained very shortly, on the national security, on what we really talk. And this is actually my agenda of the discussion today. So what we really talk when we talk on national security. Do we talk more about the hard security aspect or the dimension, or do we talk more about the soft security dimensions, which is still very important, but not, in my view, the entire view of the national security. I'll talk on values and visions that we would like to promote, and what our duty is to promote during this, again, very complex context of especially regional, but not only regional, but also global context of security. And then I will be a little bit more focused on the threats to Kosovo national security, and especially on the external hostile threats, which definitely pose quite a huge threat towards the region and also towards Kosovo. But never forgetting the strengths of Kosovo, which could be used also as part of good opportunities or good shaped opportunities to combat and to build their resilience towards the threats. And finally, the goals, let's say the national goals, especially on the coming new national security strategy, which is in the process, and is the first time that Kosovo is making or drafting a national security strategy totally, but fully based on local ownership. Kosovo had a national security strategy drafted and approved in 2010, which was not at all local ownership. Again, I'm not very insisting on local ownership when you lack the capacities, especially when you lack the expertise. But during this last year, especially last decade, a lot of capacities were built, so we can manage to have a national security strategy based on our local ownership in general. But very shortly on the what we talk when we talk on national security. So very basically, as Weber defined, we are talking on state, which shows actually, or could be defined as Weber did, as a human community that claims the monopoly of legitimate use of force, physical force, within a given territory. So we are talking about community, human community, or people. We are talking about the monopoly of the legitimate use of force, and we are talking about a territory. So that's the basic thing, and probably this definitely, or let's say at the first sight, it sounds very hard security, and it is. It is hard security because mainly we deal we deal with security sector, with defense, with intel, and the parts of the mechanism of states that make sure this part is done or this part is well established. But as Fukuyama in another hand said, and almost a century after Weber, he was talking about enforcement. So we can have a community, we can have a monopoly, or claimed monopoly of using the force. We can have like the mechanisms, and we can have also the territory, but probably we lack the enforcement. So Fukuyama, as you all know, defined the essence of stateness as the enforcement. So the state can send someone with a gun to implement the laws, to enforce the laws. Again, this sounds now very hard security, but it is not. It is more about a holistic approach. If we can, or if we manage to combine the hard security and soft security in a holistic approach, that definitely makes the country, people, the government, the public institutions much more able to defend, protect, promote, and guarantee national security. Barry Buzan, another author who talked on national security, pointed out something else. He was talking more about the, let's say, a broader framework of security, based or more focused on regional security, environment security, economic security, and other sectors or dimensions of security, which can be a clear and very direct domain of other political means, not only security sector or security apparatus means. I mentioned very shortly, because we can talk all the day long about this, just on these dimensions of the national security. But having a national security strategy ultimately means thinking big, something big. National security for what? What we intend. So the process of what we do now, as a very wide institutional interagency group, we're working on assumptions, implications, imperatives for what? To ensure we have national security, but what's the next stage? Why we need a national security? What values we promote? What is our vision in terms of establishing a country, or having a country which can claim that its national security is safe and secure? So freedom, security, peace, democracy, equality, and prosperity are the main values of Kosovo we want to promote. Making a safe, secure, and prosperous Kosovo, making Kosovo great again, making Kosovo safe and secure and prosperous. That's the vision. Hard security, soft security, what are means of national power, what are the means of national power we possess. and what are the national power means that we can use. It's always combining. Holistic approach is the best, but it's very hard to manage coming to that stage of having a real holistic approach. Security sector of Kosovo is well established. And there are two main arguments. And I agree, there is a lot to be done, to be improved. And I will try to talk also what it should be improved and what we intend to improve. But there are two main arguments. First, security sector of Kosovo does not suffer from its past. The past, meaning the communist institutions. And if you compare with the regional or the security sector of regional countries, then you see how much efforts and years it took for them to transform, to reform the security sector. Because if there is any sector that is the hardest one to be reformed or transformed, it's security sector. Because we're talking on the intel, we're talking on defense or military, we're talking on police, law enforcement in general, and this path of the institutions. Soft security, economy, education, environment, regional context, but also the interoperability. Interoperability, I'm not talking on the military domain, but the communication and interaction between the different agencies, different institutions, and that's not only the central level, but also includes the local level and the community lead. Balancing is the most critical part. What we balance, what we take from the hard security aspect and what we take from the soft security aspect. This is, like, in my experience now, the last one is the most difficult part of the process. And when we talk on the threats, because we try to promote and guarantee our national security, we try to promote and guarantee our values, and have a vision. We have a vision to make Kosovo safe and secure and prosperous. But what are the threats that we are really facing with? The top, in my view, is the external hostile threats. And we can put a wide or a very various, let's say, state actors and non-state actors that could be included in the external hostile threats. But I'll be more focused in two, which is direct interference and more from Serbia, and the Russian growing influence in the region, including Kosovo. Hybrid threats, which can combine also the two above mentioned, but it's much more sophisticated and much more difficult to build the resilience. Okay. And external threats actually are just showing a reality. In all the analysis documents that we gathered during the process of drafting the new national security strategy, we see that in all levels, this makes us to be very committed on finding the path, finding the ways, means, and the institutions or mechanisms to make Kosovo defended and safe from the external hostile threats. It is not easy, but we are just trying to do good. Now, as we all are aware, another institution is being transformed, which is KSF, to an institution with military and defense mandate. But also we will see, which is very important in my view, the information sharing in real time between all the security sector, law enforcement agencies and institutions, because this is what we lack. Even that the law enforcement, especially law enforcement institutions in Kosovo, I can really proudly say that are the most modern in the region. Still, not comparing, because it always matters with what you compare. I put it, or I just said before, the two arguments why the security sector in Kosovo is much better than in the region. But the information sharing is something we lack. This is probably going to be one of the most publicly known outcomes from the new national security strategy, even that I'm not prejudging the final outcome, because we are still in the process and this will take at least some few weeks more, if not more. But the continuance of the interference by non-formal groups, but also state actors, including Serbia and Russia, is something that we can foresee. Organized crime and corruption, yes, and I'm not putting now the second and third as the threats. Definitely the first and top is hostile threat, external hostile threat, Serbia and Russia, and the others, not limited only into state actors, because we have also non-state actors threatening Kosovo. But organized crime and corruption, especially transnational organized crime, is or shows very clearly a direct threat towards Kosovo's national security. Then we talk on terrorism, including global terrorism, violent extremism, and radicalization that leads to terrorism, and foreign fighters. Someone calls former foreign fighters. You never know if they are the former one or not. And radicalization on nationalistic and religious motives. Then economic difficulties, including informal economy, unemployment, low revenues, and other parts of the economic difficulties. Cyber threats as a separated part from the, or a separated threat from the hybrid threats, even that one can intend to include the cyber threats within the hybrid threats. And the polarized society. This is another threat or another issue that threats the values and the vision, because all are interconnected. Very shortly, because I think the part of the strength is something to be always under discussion and under the analysis, but definitely youthful population, large diaspora, international presence, including here the military and also the civilian, economic, and other part of the international presence. Natural resources, internet penetration, modern institutions, especially law enforcement, low taxes and low labor costs could show or could make a content of the strengths of Kosovo. Very shortly on the goals, it is very clear that even the new national security strategy of Kosovo will have the main goal to defend the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Kosovo. Why? To ensure security of all citizens from internal and external threats through the effective use of all means of national powers. Still, we have to work and discuss, and I really hope we can discuss also here today, about what really all national power means. But this is the concept that we are working in. Strengthening, advancing, and modernizing the agencies and institutions is another goal to be confirmed. Enhance economic development and building the national consensus it shows the two other goals. Should I talk on KSF? Very shortly, this is the one of the processes that Kosovo worked hard for years and years. KSF worked hard in its professional capacity building and credibility, making the institution the most credible, most representative, and ready force. This is a part of proudness for the Kosovo, but the story doesn't end in this regard. The process is still in a regular parliamentary procedure. This is going to be ended as regular parliamentary procedure lately, last weeks of the year. It could be a little bit faster. But we are talking about a process that shows a success and makes Kosovo also more responsible for its duty. Using all means of national power, in reality means Kosovo has to make or to play a good role internally, especially internal security, but also regionally and globally. The benefits of the transition that we were trying to explain, especially during this last year in very detailed methodological and systematic work we have done for the especially on outreaching and especially then in external outreaching, while explaining the benefits of the Kosovo and also the region on the KSF transition. The benefits so include not only the hard security part, but it goes to the economy or spurring the economy of the country, enhancing the regional stability, enhancing regional security in general, but also making Kosovo as a partner for contributing regionally and globally. And just have a, let's say, a very simple phrase of what the success story or telling our story worldwide would be. A small nation that was literally saved due to the democratic world intervention. 20 years after, is ready and credible to assist shoulder to shoulder to the democratic countries' armies in supporting peace and security and stability all over the world. That's our story. This is KSF's story. This is Kosovo's story that we want to promote and to guarantee the success. In all, and especially on external hostile threats and the hybrid threats, more specifically, no rules apply. When it comes to the mechanisms you have to build or to advance or to modernize for combating, building resilience, or preventing something like that, have in mind, no rules apply. Maybe it was always like this, since Sun Tzu, Clausewitz, or the others, but the current international and regional context just gives a lot of arguments that definitely there is no rule to be applied. Finally, because I was so long, I think, Robert, drafting this strategy, which is just a part, a small part of the entire national security architecture. It's like an art. And this is the part that I think I will fail. We will fail making the art. We can be very good in the mechanical and technical part of the work, But making that in art, it's very difficult. Thank you. Please.
Hi, I have a question. Can you tell us more about the theory of PowerPoint tuning which we've been working about?
I didn't get you.
Oh.
Reading an article regarding the
Power sharing?
power partitioning, exactly. Yeah. Can you tell us more about that?
If I got it right, and you're talking on power sharing democracy?
Partitioning. I mean, you've been writing that about your master thesis approach. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. Okay. Someone calls power sharing democracy. Someone calls constitutionalism. Someone calls it consensual democracy. However, it makes actually that's the model of our country, and there are two different approaches. First, country of Kosovo, like the model of the state, is not an experiment, and because there were a lot of discussions about the model, the power sharing democracy. What we have is power sharing democracy. The power sharing democracy is, in our case, is between the ethnic groups. So the division of the society, polarizing the society, a polarized society that we are still working on, or facing that again and again and again. It means in this case, the ethnic groups, because in Austria it's regions. In Lebanon is religion. In South Africa is race. In Bosnia is, again, ethnicity. Then we have Italy in small part of the northern Italy, but not only in the northern Italy, because Italy is also with a lot of power sharing democracy principles. So the idea, generally, to keep it very short, the idea is that all the communities, doesn't matter what the difference is, are represented in public life, in public institutions, and have a voice to decide for themselves. Now, Kosovo has somewhere in between, in the middle, in terms of the arrangements. Like Macedonia has lower arrangements of the power sharing. And I can take the example of official language. In Macedonia, the Albanian language is the official language in use. In different municipalities, or in any municipality where the Albanian community makes at least 5% of that municipality. In Kosovo, we have those arrangements for other ethnicities, but for Kosovo Serbs, we have Serbian language as official language countrywide. In Switzerland, you have 4 languages. 5, sorry. That makes much more, and it goes to confederation, clearly. Bosnia is federation. So then you see Kosovo is somewhere in the middle.
So you're following the Atichari...
Atichari plan is not an experiment. It's based in a theory that worked in some countries, that failed in Cyprus.
Yeah.
It's nearly failing now in Lebanon. Not yet failing, but nearly failing. Had a lot of difficulties in South Africa, but was working very good in Netherlands, in Belgium, in Switzerland, in Austria, in Italy. Yeah. Even in Malaysia, Indonesia, they have some ports, but it's not very clear model. And I don't know. I didn't read a lot for that part of the world.
Hi, Mr. Ramadani. Thank you for coming today and speaking with us. While having an army is a necessary component for a state to secure a prosperous future, are you concerned that Serbia will perceive a KSF transformation as a severe violation of both the UN Resolution 1244 and the Military Technical Agreement? And if so, are you prepared for any adverse reactions by Belgrade?
Are we prepared? Actually, that's our job. To what extent we can prepare ourselves, that's something to be discussed. Regarding to the UN Security Council Resolution 1244, it is actually there are two paragraphs of the resolution that talk on the armed forces in Kosovo. That's paragraph 9 and paragraph 15. Both of those paragraphs speak about or emphasize about the armed forces in Kosovo. First one, the paragraph 9, emphasizes the need, the urgency of Serbian army and other military and paramilitary forces to leave Kosovo. And the second one, which is 15th paragraph, talks about or emphasizes about the necessity for dissolution of the, as it calls, Albanian resistance groups. Actually, KLA and Albanian resistance groups. And that's done. Both of those paragraphs are well implemented. In contrary, the resolution 1244 promotes building the multi-ethnic and professional institutions, and that's KSF. So it's multi-ethnic and professional, based on build it upon the really high standards of NATO countries. And that's it. So the resolution 1244 does not prevent having a Kosovo army. While not preventing and actually promoting multi-ethnic and professional institutions, including security sector, that there is no need to mention somewhere that that institution should be like this or like that. Does it answer to your question or a little bit?
Can I continue?
Yeah, please.
Yep, thank you. First of all, thank you very much, Mr. Ramadani, for being here today. Your lecture on the issue of the overall performance of the ministry was very informative. Thank you. I have two questions. First of all, considering that the military spending as the part of GDP in Kosovo for 2016 has been 0.79% of the GDP in Kosovo, and in Serbia it has been 1.34%. Which it gives you a basic relative performance of both countries, seeing that Serbia spends much more on military spending than Kosovo. Considering this, the overall budget and let's say the part of the budget that is attributed to the military spending is a very good indicator on the performances of the state in the instances of the security forces and military in the military performances overall. I would say that this actually is a very good indicator of a security threat in the instances of balancing between countries in the region, because you mentioned balancing as a very important point of our foreign policy. And in the instances of the regional stability. My second the specific question regarding this issue is that does Kosovo intend and plan to actually increase its overall budget share on military spending or not? What are your plans for the future? And my second question is that does the Ministry of Security Forces explore ideas of concrete cooperation, concrete military cooperation with Albania, not just in the sense of not just formal, not formal cooperation, but something concrete as in terms of the future. Thank you.
Great, and I'm delighted you made these two questions. Maybe this is what I really liked. First, and this is not just a narrative. we're not building up our military as a response to Serbia. We're building up our military to consolidate our state. And doesn't matter who the external threat is. We have to work on consolidating our state and our mechanisms to defend the, as I said, sovereignty and territorial integrity. Second, in regarding to your first question, the plans. Yes, there is a very detailed plan on the transition of KSF, but also in defense policies, because this too goes actually as a common point. Regarding to the exact numbers of GDP, someone says it's 6 billion, someone says 7 billion. So it's somewhere in between. The current GDP in Kosovo is between 6 and 7 billion. So maybe the Ministry of Finance will be much more concrete on this part. Kosovo nowadays is spends for KSF and the Ministry of KSF, let's say in general, around 0.8% of the GDP. In the coming years, within the transition period, the commitment of the government and the commitment, even in written form, of the current the Prime Minister, is to go to 2% of GDP in 6 weeks. 6 years. I wish that would happen with 6 weeks. It could go to 2% of GDP to within 6 years. And again, someone can say, why 6 years? You need to be much more faster in your decisions and plans for budgetary spending to military and defense. But that's something that takes time. That's something that needs to consolidate and build the capacities, not only the budgetary capacities, but also the professional education, personnel, equipments, and the weapons system. Regarding to the Serbia, particularly, there are a lot of, let's say, clear indicators that what Serbia is spending on its military is more spending in its corruption than military. And here's the example. They bought 6 MiG-27 and 29s from Russia, and they explained that as the biggest donation ever for Serbia. Then, as a donation, they had just to pay the some licenses and things like that, so they paid 20 million euros. Still, it's a good donation in this regard. But just as an annex of that contract, they contracted the company to maintain and service the planes for 185 million euros in 2 years. And, which is even more ridiculous, the validity of those planes, MiG-29s, expires in 2019. So it's all about spending 200 millions for garbage. And this is, I'm just mentioning some of the indicators that we don't have to really think on competing in the wrong path. Why we have to compete, and this is related to the second question of you, is the concept of smart defense. And this is not only with Albania, this is also with Montenegro and Macedonia and our close neighbors. We are part of the concept of smart defense. Our KSF that has niche capabilities, especially on some niche capabilities that the other countries in the region lack. Actually, those capabilities are also in the hands, let's say, in disposal of our neighboring countries. Albania has some niche capabilities too. They offered a support of smart defense to be in disposal of Kosovo, Macedonia, Montenegro too. Montenegro has some other niche capabilities. And this is the concept. So small countries that have to balance, again, also the budget, because you cannot just destroy or kill the other governmental programs while budgeting only the army or the military or the defense, but you have to see balancing within the region. Now, like Montenegro has no navy because the cost was very high for them, but they can use Italian navy as something, a niche capability that is in Montenegrin disposal if they need. So that's the concept. Yes, we are in this concept, and we will advance this concept, especially now in soon to come Ministry of Defense of Kosovo, while revising our memorandum of understandings that we have with the countries in the region. We have 14 MOUs with individual countries. 12 of them are NATO members. So I think we are quite in the right track in this regard. Should I leave now? The questions are becoming harder and harder. Should I leave now?
Thanks for having this discussion with us. You mentioned that we're at some sort of advantage in terms of national security regionally, despite the fact that we lack on the information sharing. Could you elaborate on that a bit more? Like, what are the reasons that we're at an advantage?
It's maybe more prejudging the real reasons, but that's my real personal view. That also the fact that special law enforcement, general security and law enforcement agencies in Kosovo are much more modern than any country in the region. The path of the building the institutions was very separately. So you probably heard about the notion path dependency. So a lot of Kosovo institutions, let's say police or customs or finance intel unit or other institutions, including, let's say, Intel, which is much more younger institutions, or KSF in the current mandate, or build it in quite individual path. Mainly because some of the institutions were, like police, was established in the UNMIX time. Then they had a lot of transition and transforming and reforming within the institution. Also the other institutions, but coordinating all the security and law enforcement institutions, that's a challenge. Probably there will be a fusion center for information sharing, but this is not, this is actually clear prejudging the outcome of the strategy, because we are not yet to that moment of recommending to the Prime Minister, who will be the, actually he's the responsible for making sure that the strategy is available to be implemented. So that's the final word.
Do the last two questions.
Or three or four. Or three or four. General, are we safe?
Hello, Mr. Ramadani. Thank you very much for this presentation. I just wanted to ask, because throughout your presentation you mentioned that KSF is a multi-ethnic group and professional, but lately we had the problem where some people from those multi-ethnic groups, they left the KSF. So I wanted to ask, does the ministry has a strategy or a special plan on how to keep the people from different multi-ethnic groups part of the KSF and not to have those circumstances when they decide to leave KSF?
Thank you. Just to be politically correct, it's not KSF a multi-ethnic group, it's a multi-ethnic institution. Yes, that is unfortunate when we saw a very hostile, really hostile pressure and threat towards, at the end of the day, our citizens. And we made it, let's say, made all our efforts for also informing all the stakeholders in Kosovo, but also to the highest level of the levels of multilateral organizations such as NATO, EU, but also to the individual countries. A special plan for that? There is no special plan. There is a plan, and that plan will be just continuing our inclusiveness efforts all over the country, making possible that the Kosovo Serbs, because this is the issue with Kosovo Serbs, facing that huge pressure and threats towards them and towards their families. You know, some of the, let's say, some actions were taken by the law enforcement, mainly law enforcement institution in Kosovo. Some actions were taken by KFOR, especially in the public appearance of the KFOR in some of the community zones. But say the plan is just being open and being attractive. That, but at the end of the day, this pressure, even that the goal was to obstruct the transition process of KSF, their plan, in this case Serbia's plan, just failed. Yep.
Also, my name is I'm a sergeant at KSF. My question is regarding the military academy. Will KSF to build bilateral agreements like they do with Albania, but we incorporate Albanian cadets here with other countries such as Macedonia or Montenegro? We know that I personally have friends in Macedonia that their fathers have fought in the war, so I'm sure there would be demand for this.
I know that this is a process going on. As you mentioned, we have at least one from Albania, one left, I think, in the toughest week or something like that. But this is the process. We had our cadets also in different countries, including in Macedonia. This is a part of the just current discussions of the last meetings between two ministerial levels, actually. So yes, that will happen. I don't know what the exactly if that will be possible for next year, but for sure that will happen.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. During your speech, and thank you for that, you mentioned that Russia is one of the main threats to Kosovo in Serbia. So can I ask you specifically what kind of threats have actually Russia done to Kosovo internally, because externally you actually just mentioned a lot of them, and how did the national security of Kosovo face them? And just for the sake of the argument, who are those other states that we are being threatened from? Because you said Russia, Serbia, and others.
No.
Thank you very much.
Whew. I had to leave. There are generally, I'm not making the list of the really direct threats and interference of Russian authorities within Kosovo, but all the, let's say, fields are very important, so they are equal. One that I can mention is dividing the society. especially investing in the Serb community, Kosovo Serb community, to be as much as possible divided from the society. And this is, as I said, in my view, is one of the national security threats, because the society has to be promoted, and actually we have to invest even more for having a society as a whole. Second is the obstructing the political processes, and especially we had the real case of the, and sorry, just to be back on the KSF transition process, but it's very easily to see the statistics also. We had a period of time during the year 2018 that the reactions from the Russian MFA were much more in terms of numbers or statistics than Serbia's reactions. And that led to the try, at least, of obstructing the process. But also in other levels, not only in one process, but also in other processes. Spreading the nationalistic, let's say, investing in radicalization on based on nationalistic motives is another direct interference and threat that we are facing with regarding to Russian influence and activities in the ground. What are the other states? I can mention as very directly Serbia and Russian as very open and with a clear agenda towards, a negative agenda towards the Kosovo national security. The other states, non-states and states actors, it's not just that we can define by names, and this is the reason. We can define by fields of activities. So spreading the violent extremism based on the manipulation of religious beliefs could be by 10 or more countries. We cannot just have now a list of 10 countries saying this is a hostile threat because you see only in one specific field. Why we cannot go by names is very practically and methodologically working with the security institutions. We give the instruction, the vision, and the top priorities, let's say, to security institutions on the fields, no matter what the name is. So if we see an activity on, again, spreading religious, terroristic ideologies, what's the important, what's the importance of the real name of the country? Then, because we can see the same countries as quite cooperative with Kosovo in other fields, that's why we cannot just make those countries as hostile enemies or hostile threats as we see very clearly with Serbia and Russia. Does it answer? No. Yeah, I mean, that's the concept. It's not, I'm not trying to escape any, mention any name. Really? Trying to. Trying to.
Well, thank you very much. I think it was a privilege to have the Deputy Minister here and the General from the Kosovo Security Force. I think it's an extra privilege that we had the opportunity to have some insights into the development of the revision of the national security strategy. I understand that we are one of the first institutions who are actually getting this first information. So thank you very much again, and thank you very much for your great participation and for your pretty tricky questions sometimes. So don't forget to sign. Thank you very much, and have a nice and beautiful day.